Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Denver, Colorado, it's time for Franchise Bible Coach Radio. Now, here are your hosts.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to Franchise Bible Coach Radio podcast with Rick and Rob. I'm Rick Grossman, and I'll introduce my co-host Rob here in just a second. And our special guest today is Michael Katz, and he is a business, real estate, and franchise attorney. And of course, a good friend of mine and co-author of Franchise Bible 8th edition with me as well. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much. I appreciate both having me on the show, Rick and Rob.
Yeah, thank you. So what we're going to do today is a little bit different format. This is our week 5, which is focusing in on what we call the franchise equation. And of course, Michael and I have been talking about that in other areas of the coaching sessions and things like that. But the first few weeks, we focused on getting ready for this 12-week challenge, the Fight for Your Franchise Challenge, and you can learn more about that at franchisebiblecoach.com. But the Fight for Your Franchise Challenge is something we put together. It's a free, no strings attached program, basically just to help our industry get through this time, this pandemic crisis, the struggles that a lot of businesses are facing right now. A lot of franchisors and franchise owner operators are in a whole new world right now and have been for about a month and a half. And what are we going to do to get through it and then not only survive it, but thrive as business owners? And so we're really focusing in on with our guests and our strategies and coaching sessions on how to get through this time. And so the first few weeks we were getting ready, doing things like setting goals and KPIs, getting in the right mindset, getting your team involved with what we call building the tribe. And then we started getting into strategy last week and implementation of actual strategies. We started with the evaluate, adapt, and overcome strategy. And now this week we're focusing in on how do we get the most efficiency in all 5 departments of your business and what we call the franchise equation. And the franchise equation basically is a coaching technique and leadership technique that I've used for years. And it gives us the ability to break your whole business down, whether you're a franchisor or a franchise owner, into 5 different departments. And every business has these departments. We have leadership, marketing, operations, finance, and legal, and then technology. And those 5 departments, when you define them and then increase efficiencies and best practices within each one of those departments, you get a better outcome for a business. So for instance, you might be really strong at marketing and sales, but need some help in finance and legal. So you get some outsourced help there, or you get a coach in certain areas of your business. And so what we're going to do with this first step of the process is just identify those different departments. And then we're just going to roundtable a little bit with Rob and Michael and kind of get into the departments and start talking about ways that our franchise clients have innovated and created some really good practices and ways that we help them there. So let's start with introducing Rob Ganley, my co-host, and let him introduce himself, and then we'll start jumping right into it. Hey, Rob.
Hey, guys. Michael, thanks again for being here.
Appreciate it, Rob.
You got it. It's a pleasure to have people with such broad and deep expertise, especially in different fields. And I'm looking forward to this discussion. Again, I'm Rob Ganley. I'm a partner in a digital marketing software platform and have been in the franchise industry for about 20 years now. Started off as a broker and a consultant, and just love the industry and love what we're doing here. So look forward to your input, Michael. Go ahead, Rick. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Michael, I know you real well, and I know Rob does too, but why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you ended up in the franchise world?
Thanks. Well, an interesting fact, the franchising was starting to become something way back in the 50s and 60s, but it wasn't until the 70s that it got large enough to get on the radar of various states and the federal government. And it was just at that time that I started practicing law. In 1979, California passed the first laws relating directly to franchising. The federal government, through the Federal Trade Commission, jumped on the bandwagon right after that, and that's when I went into private practice. So I've basically been involved in franchising from a legal and counseling side since it became a law in the several disclosure states and in the federal government. In that time, I've represented hundreds of franchisors and franchisees, both in franchising and then also in business organizations, and counseling them on various aspects of their entire business. So it's
Wonderful.
been an interesting time.
Yeah, it's a fascinating business for sure. And we love franchising because it's one of the most, if not the most efficient business growth models out there. And we do love that. So awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Michael. So let's get into it a little bit here and break down those 5 departments, and then just kind of roundtable a little bit on what we've seen out there. We all have different clients that we work with that are franchisors and franchisees. And of course, we even have some clients that are not in the franchise industry, but are entrepreneurs and business owners. So what I'd like to do for our listeners today is kind of discuss some of those gold nuggets, some of those things that we're seeing out there, innovations and ideas and ways of doing things more efficiently as we get through these different 5 departments. So let's start with leadership. What I found as a franchise and business coach is that people kind of get operations and marketing and those different departments, and sometimes they overlook leadership. And it's almost like it's kind of a given, like, well, I'm here, I'm the boss, I'm the leader, right? But what we spend a lot of our time doing as coaches is developing really, really great leaders. And I've often said this, that you can have a mediocre business model and a great leader, and it'll be a great franchise. And you can have a great business model and a mediocre leader, and it won't be a great franchise. So
Exactly.
when people ask me what's the big differentiator between a success and failure in franchising, it's always leadership, leadership, leadership. And the better the leadership is, the stronger the brand will be. And that's not just the franchisor. That's every franchise owner is a leader, right? And every one of their managers, if they're a multi-unit franchisee, they're leaders as well. So when we look at leadership development, we look at it as kind of a global solution, not just the top of the leadership, but all the way down through the organization. So when you think about leadership with some of your recent clients, franchisors or franchisees, what kind of things have you seen just in the 5 or 6 weeks since the COVID-19 outbreak has taken place that is stuck out in your mind as something that's been really noteworthy, Michael?
Appreciate it. And it's a great question. Leaders are not innate. Leaders are made. While a person can have leadership ability, if it's not nurtured in them, it does no good. On the other hand, if a person doesn't have leadership, they can be taught to understand what that means. And in the last 5 or 6 weeks, this is really what I've been talking to clients about. It's time for the leaders in the business to stand up. That doesn't mean that, for instance, the president of the company or the equity owner of the company shoulders everything by his or herself. What it means is that they understand the necessity of working with their team. And in a franchise situation, if you're the franchisor, that's your back office staff, who might be your marketing people, but could be also your employees, to get input from them. What do they think is important? And what I've told them is to get this information, and then they need to collate it into a cogent message for their employees and for their franchisees. Franchisees need to hear from the franchisors. And it became one of the first things we talked about. As a leader, you can't hide from these difficulties. You need to do just the opposite, which is contact people and talk about it. An okay answer is, I don't know, and I'm trying to figure it out myself. But not telling the people that are looking to you for leadership, not talking to them, is, I think, the biggest mistake that a lot of folks have been making. Over the last few weeks, they're starting to remedy this because they're seeing the value of talking with their franchisees in the case of a franchisor. The franchisees are talking to other franchisees. They're talking to their franchisor. And they're looking to each other beyond the mere relationship of one party to another. They're looking at each other as human beings. What are we going to do to get through this? And in every case, the feedback I've gotten is it's made each system more responsive. It's made each system more sensitive. It's made the individuals more sensitive to each other. And it's had an incredibly positive outcome for all of these systems. Nobody's out of the woods. We all have to do this together, and the communication is what they've done. And I think that's where leadership in these hard times needs to be focusing.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, Rob, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that it's exceptionally hard for a team to function without clarity and without assurances. And it starts at the top. And we've been talking to a lot of folks like you, Michael, over the last few weeks. And you're right. It's almost like it's breeding better habits. It's forcing people to do things at another level because the communication is obviously different. And now I think everybody's rethinking how they do communicate and how they do lead. But it's leading to positive things, right, around leadership. So,
Rick and I for a long time have been collaborating. And one of the phenomena we've noticed and we've always talked about is for a franchisor, talk to your franchisees. And honestly, while that seems to be self-evident, it hasn't been. It's only over the past few years that folks that have worked with Rick and myself and with you, Rob, have heard and finally listened to the mantra of listen to your franchisees and talk to them. What I've been coaching for years is call your franchisees every quarter and say to them, I'm not calling about money. I'm not calling because you've done anything wrong. I'm just calling to see how you're doing. It may be a 10-second call or it could be a 2-hour call. But just the act of reaching out to these folks and asking how they're doing has created such goodwill in systems that it's been amazing. And it's really systems that haven't been doing that until now because of COVID. They're finally realizing the value of it. So what you've said, Rob, is the case. This is causing them to pick up good habits. And, that's great.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We were just speaking earlier with another brand, and one thing they did mention was the franchisees were just taking the lead with such great ideas, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, maybe what was happening before, but now it's forcing this collaboration and this innovation, which is really neat to hear. But because we're asking those questions.
And that's one of the hallmarks of a great leader. Great leaders don't do it on their own. They take the input from others. They give the attributes to the person that told them that, and then they provide the information. So having a franchisor communicate with other franchisees by telling them, I talked with X franchisee today and he had a great idea, creates such goodwill in the entire system that it'll play out for years for you. And that's true between franchisee and their employees, or between franchisees and franchisees.
Absolutely. Yeah, communication is great. A great tool for developing bonds within an organization. And here's the ironic thing about being in a great economy and being busy where we were just a few weeks ago is that you're so busy, you kind of lose sight of the little things, the details that made you famous and popular and successful in the first place.
Right.
And sometimes your success can actually backfire on you a little bit. But what I am seeing with our clients and the folks we're talking to for the podcast, et cetera, is that they're really spending the time to really bond with their community, not only their franchise or franchisee community, but their community that they live in, people in the area. We were talking to a gentleman earlier today on the podcast that is a franchisee, and he was working on ways that he could distribute food through his restaurant to people in his community, and giving and donating and also selling grocery items through the restaurant. So, and I was able to tell him that this is great innovation that is building trust in the community, and will pay dividends in the future for him as well. So very, very strong bonding going on here. And what I often say is that people galvanize under pressure. It's why people that go through and serve in the military together, or go through a tragedy of some kind and survive some kind of a crisis together, are kind of friends forever, right? Well, this is a galvanizing time. Your organization can come out the other end of this stronger than it's ever been when you really look at it from a positive perspective.
Another thing on the leadership perspective is both franchisors and franchisees should be reaching out to their vendors to talk with them about what can be done when we start to reopen. Yeah. And as importantly, talk with your customers. In the olden days, when we just started having the internet, and our franchisee clients were complaining that they had to take all this personal information, including things like email. Now is the time to use all of that and to contact all of your clients, vendors, et cetera. Tell them where you are. You're still here. You're still working. How you're going to open, what you're going to do to start reopening your business, how you're going to help your employees and your customers be safe. Yeah. Once again, as you said, Rick, it's building the community, and this will pay dividends for a very long time.
Right. Yeah. And just to kind of finish on the leadership element, that, as I always say, be decisive, be transparent, and be inspirational. Be somebody that your tribe, your troops, your people will follow onto the battlefield. And that's really kind of the essence of the leadership there. And carry that through to your franchise leaders as well. If you're a franchisor, every single one of your owners is a leader, and their managers and their staff, and just really focus on leadership development in your organization all the way through it, and you'll definitely benefit from that. So the second category in our lineup here is marketing. And we've seen a lot of things change with marketing. A lot of, I have a client that was basically focused on door-to-door sales. Well, you can't knock on doors right now, right? So that had to change. And we have folks that have retail showrooms, and we have restaurants, of course, that have not been able to have seated in-store dining for quite some time. So marketing has to change, the whole way that we message to our customers. So from the marketing perspective, why don't we start with Rob this time? Rob, have you heard any stories that have kind of risen to the top of your list as far from the marketing standpoint?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of interesting. Almost any business, any brand in the franchising industry is doing something interesting. Most are. If you ask them, sit down, talk to them. But one of the interesting ones is just a recent one, is that is a restaurant concept. And their idea was to, and I think we can all relate to the time we're in right now, where we feel a little helpless in how we can help each other. And one of their ideas was, helping the healthcare, the frontline workers, by saying to their audience, to their community, to their consumer base, hey, would you like to buy something for a healthcare worker? And they match half, and the other half is sponsored by the person. And I thought to myself, what a great way to introduce your brand to a new audience while they're helping others. I don't think there's many people that will forget about the name of the food place, right? If you bought it for your mom or a loved one that's a nurse or somebody that's in the front line. So it's a great idea. It helped a lot of people, and I thought that was a tremendous way to keep the conversation going, keep the momentum going. I think all restaurants could follow suit in a similar kind of way. You mentioned something earlier about giving away some of the extra resources, getting on Facebook, and there's a lot of energy and virality to that, right? People love to share good stories, and so it's a good idea, and it's the right thing to do when you're helping others and getting your name out there at the same time.
Yeah, and remember that we always, and I'm saying remember to all of our listeners, because in our past coaching sessions, we've been talking a lot about what's it going to look like when we're through this time. And how do we get back to whatever the new normal will be? And everybody agrees that's in the franchise business that one of the most important factors as we reopen and we get back to normal is trust and the customer's ability to feel safe using your product or service. And so anything you can do right now during this time to communicate with your customer base, your community, that will build trust and will build safety into your business model, you're going to benefit from that for a long, long time. And so that program that they're running builds trust. It builds that bond, right? And we see that with some of the other restaurant models that have innovated things like no contact delivery and ordering on the apps. You see delivery services where they notify you through your app that the food is on the front porch, and then they leave it there, and then all types of different businesses doing different things. A couple of weeks ago, we had Anthony Geisler from Exponential Fitness, and they have 1,500 locations that were all closed down simultaneously, and they had to innovate, and they shifted very quickly to online training. So they were able to have their customers doing exercise training through their apps and through their online training resources. So just amazing innovations that have happened in the marketing. And the marketing has to be adapted too, so that people are able to communicate via text and through social media and things like that. Right, Rob?
Yeah, totally. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, as a guy with a technology background and a marketing and sales background, digital marketing kind of fuses those together. And, I've lived through it, pre-internet, post-internet. And what I would say the good thing for everybody is it's putting a lot of focus on using digital technology for the future, because the younger generations are going to behave differently, and they're coming and growing up and getting older. And so I think it's been great that these companies, a lot of them, the things they're doing will stick, will continue on. And so they're learning things that not only because of the situation, but the things I think will have value for their audience and their customers going forward anyway. And then so why not do it? Why not continue to do some form of it? So that's been nice to see.
Yeah. Michael, what do you think in the marketing department? Any stories?
I usually defer to you because I always think of you and Rob as my marketing gurus. The one thing that I have seen is at least two of my clients are posting their rules on their front doors. These are restaurants. Of what they're doing inside to stay safe. One of them, every hour, even though at most folks are walking in to pick up food, though many of them have somebody that will bring it out, that they're cleaning every hour. And that they're wiping down the surfaces with whatever appropriate cleaner that they need to use. And it's just as you said, they're bringing confidence to their brand in a way that we didn't expect before, but now I think is going to be with us for quite some time.
Yeah,
and what he's done is right to their all of their client base, their customer base, and have told them. They just reiterated what they're doing.
Perfect. Makes a lot of sense. Well, and marketing kind of blends nicely with operations, and operations are different, right? If you're a dog groomer and you have a mobile unit and you drive around and groom dogs, it's a little bit different operational system than, say, a full-fledged restaurant model with 60, 70 employees. But operations are part and parcel with every business, right? So we're seeing a lot of innovation in that area. And it may be as simple as, while we have downtime operationally, it's a good time to refresh the brick and mortar locations, if it's retail or restaurant, and do some deep cleaning and some maintenance in that area. But if you're a carpet cleaning business or a mobile business, there's operational things that need to be done there as well, right, Michael?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what many of my brick and mortar franchisors are requesting of their franchisees. And it's one of the ways they're communicating. They sent out the request and they're asking for feedback, and they're getting feedback of what can we do? We tried this and it didn't work. And it's, again, the communication. But it's just as you said, Rick, they're taking the time, which they haven't had before, and going back and doing all the stuff they hadn't done before. Deep cleaning is one of the big ones, but also repairing broken stuff. You can still get parts and maintenance equipment necessary to make yourself operational when you fully open. For the non-brick and mortars, it's still the same thing, though it's a little more subtle. Their operational work tends to be on the finance and legal side, and I think we've talked about this before. They're now going back and doing all the things they didn't quite have time to do to make sure that their back office operations are ready. Learning finally how to use QuickBooks besides just putting in two numbers and hoping when you press a button, whatever is supposed to happen happens.
Right.
So that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. So operationally, there's training and there's systems. If you're a franchise owner, franchisor probably has a lot of resources for expanded learning and opportunities there, maybe some of your staff. But if you're a franchisor, either through your coaches or through your advisors or even third-party services, there's a lot to learn. And now's a good time to take on that extra time to educate yourself on things. They're very, very good.
And for the franchisees, if you're coming upon a system that you've learned or worked through trial and error, let your franchisor know. The franchisor will be appreciative. Everybody has become more open to ideas and change than I've ever seen in my career.
Right. Yeah. We know we're going through a time of acceptance for technology and online training and online learning like never before. I think it was Jason from Entrepreneur Magazine that pointed out that Zoom went from, 10 million, Rob, to 200 million.
This is a massive leap. I don't know if that's an exact number, but it was massive. In fact,
it's a lot.
I can tell you right now, real fast, there was a waiting line with Zoom, and nothing against Zoom. They've had to do what they've had to do. But it was like 285 people in line for a question.
To get to Zoom?
To get to their help desk. Yeah, that's how busy they are.
Oh, wow.
Helping everybody do this kind of stuff that we're doing.
Yeah, well, and so many people that never used online training or online webinars have jumped into this world. So we're going to see things like virtual discovery days become the order of the day, where it wasn't before. So lots of good things. We'll talk more about that when we get to technology. But Rob, anything else from the operational standpoint, category, department that you want to add?
Not so much. One comment I did think of while we were talking is just in terms of one of the franchisees that I spoke to recently shared with me that, he put to work his employees, right, to kind of, like you said, remodel. Michael said something about fixing things and catching up.
Yeah.
they literally did a full remodel and they've been keeping their employees busy while in the downtime. So I thought that was great. I mean, the focus is taking care of the employees the best they can. And in their case, it made sense to do that. But I just love it. I love that everybody's being productive, helping each other.
That's great. That's great news.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, and then we have finance and legal, which is Michael's favorite category. And of course, we think of you, of course, Michael, whenever we think of finance and legal. But stories about, we kind of broke down during the coaching session what it is and some of the tips for that area. But what about stories about actual clients? And we won't mention names, of course, but things that are important in the finance and legal area, that department that needs attention right now.
Well, as you can imagine, the raft of calls I've gotten over the past 4 weeks now has been about the CARES Act,
right,
and the PPP. It didn't lose its funding. It ran out of money, and Congress and the president just re-upped that. So I've called everybody that was concerned. And told them to get back involved with the payroll payment program. Continue talking with your bankers. Immediately make application. The worst that can happen is that you're in line and you don't get money, but you can't even have a chance if you don't make the application. Right. And tell your employees, and remember also that the CARES Act has unemployment parts of it that will help with unemployment payments, that will help gig workers and solo business owners get basically unemployment. This was a part of the act that wasn't talked about a lot because everybody was concentrating on small business. But it's there, and I encourage folks to send questions to Rick or Rob, and we can respond to those, or to go to the SBA, Small Business Small Business folks, and look at their website. That's very important. The next thing, I was receiving also a lot of calls about what they need to do with their businesses, and it was kind of a weird question because they weren't quite sure what they meant. And what we finally figured out was, as we talked about before, they have time now that they haven't had, and they want to get their businesses organized. So we've talked about organizing their books and records if you're a corporation, or having the annual meetings and making sure you have minutes, working on your bylaws or your operating agreement. Bylaws are for a corporation, operating agreements are for limited liability business entities. Now's the time to do that. Call your attorneys and your CPAs. We're all still working, and it's important for everybody that I've talked to that's in our industry to let their clients know that we're here for them and are ready to help. As I said before, now's the time to learn QuickBooks, and I'm pointing a finger at myself as well, that I've delved more into QuickBooks now that I've had time than I ever have in the past. And I already see where I can be saving money in our practice here. Yeah. So that's what we've been seeing, and we've been responding to.
Good. Yeah, and from my standpoint, I have clients that are using this time to kind of take the leap and get into some other technology that impacts the finance and legal. So for some folks, they were just so busy, they've always wanted to move their franchise disclosure to an electronic platform like DocuSign or something, but it was just too big of a project. They couldn't slow down long enough to take that on. Well, there's multiple platforms that are suitable for that, and there are some benefits to being able to do that electronic disclosure. And so if you haven't done that in the past, there's the resources for that.
Good point.
Yeah. And also, just kind of ties in more into the marketing piece, but a lot of folks that have been thinking about doing virtual discovery days, but really haven't made the jump. And now's a good time to try that. And if you are a franchisor that's been thinking about virtual discovery days, but you haven't really figured out how to do it, give us a call over at Franchise Bible Coach. We have been doing virtual discovery days for well over a year, very successfully. And we've been developing that even before this pandemic happened. So we'd be glad to help you with that. So
I guess one thing from a legal point of view, I had a couple of calls generated because franchisors are just starting to do this, and they wanted to know if it was legal to have virtual calls. And the answer is you bet, and of course.
Yeah.
It's the way to go to continue to keep your pipeline energized.
Right.
For franchisors, though, I'm hoping they know this. Many of the registration states have extended the date on which renewals are due for the registration states. So again, there is time to do that. And it's also a good time to revisit your documents. Right. Though we do it once a year, it's the rare franchisor that literally reads their document once a year and either asks questions about what they don't quite understand or makes changes that they've been thinking about, but they just haven't had time. And we are responding to those as well. And it's been a breath of fresh air to have our clients really delve into the documents.
Yeah, you have a little extra time.
Absolutely.
Well, the other thing, too, is that it's a different platform. Virtual discovery days are a little bit different. I get the same types of questions when it comes to, is it okay to use electronic disclosure? And my standard answer is the same rules apply. It doesn't change your rules and regulations around financial performance representations and disclosure timing and everything else. The same rules apply. You're just using different methods of delivery and so forth. So just as long as you stay in the guidelines,
yes, absolutely right.
Guidelines, you should be in good shape. So as we we could talk about this. You get the three of us on the line talking about franchising. We could probably go for 5 or 6 hours and never run out of anything to talk about. But I know the listeners want to keep these in bite-sized chunks. So we'll wrap up here in a few minutes. But our last category is kind of Rob's bailiwick, which is technology. So technology, oh my goodness, I saved that one for last because the huge impact that we're seeing. I was talking to my daughter the other day and I was like, just imagine if this was 30 years ago. Just think how different it would be. We're all able to function pretty much at a higher level even from home, depending on our business models, of course. I can't say everybody can, but we're able to function a lot better than we would if we didn't have the technologies that we have at our fingertips today. So, Rob, when you look at technology being your main focus, what kind of stories are you hearing out there from franchisors and franchisees of ways that have changed their business model for the better in the last month and a half?
Well, so at the very high level of that question is the way you look at things to begin with, right? So technology, the internet, and everything that has evolved from that is really a different way of looking at any situation you're in, but we tend to keep things in a box of what we understand. And what I think was interesting about this whole impact and the response to this impact is that it forced people to think differently. And I think that's really the problem I see with most folks when prior to this, when they think about technology, it's almost something they want to push to the side and have someone else do. Really, it should be your friend. It should be something that, you look at and say, what can we do different? Why do we do it that way? And can we do it differently and better, right? Can we serve better? Can we perform better? And I think that's really what technology is for. It's not to keep up with anything. It's not to do the latest and greatest thing that others might be doing. It's more about how can I improve my business, right? The different areas of my business. And what questions am I not asking myself? Am I not asking of the technology, right? But it's forced innovations across the board. We're hearing things like restaurants doing a lot of innovative delivery models, right? Like pick it up at the curb or deliver it with an air sealed package to make sure it's fresh and sanitized, right? Some of these things may stick with us a while. Some of these may just be additional services that they offer for those that just think, well, that's cool. I could just swing by the front of the building and grab my food, It might just be something that's nice to offer a certain percentage of folks. Hearing a lot of stories about virtual discovery days, right? And you and I, a couple of years ago, we asked ourselves that question. Why don't we do it this way? There's a big expense associated with traveling and doing discovery days. Not that you shouldn't do them, but the reality is, why not try virtual? Maybe virtual has its place, and certainly now it does. But again, asking yourself these questions is really the key, and it's sort of forced that innovation out of folks. Another great thing is a lot of technology vendors are offering amazing things, right? They're saying, look, we have these amazing abilities. We mentioned Zoom earlier. I've seen other companies say, it's free, use our platform. We've got the bandwidth, we can do this. Other video companies, internet service providers are adjusting their networks and accommodating people working from home at levels they never expected, to get to, but clearly they've been able to adjust. So it's just been a collaboration of every industry. But the big thing is asking that question. What can technology do for my business? What's relevant to the perennial principles that you, Rick and Michael, you guys teach? You guys know how to grow a business over the many decades that you've worked in business. And so those perennial concepts don't always change. It's like, what can the technology do to help me do what makes sense over in the business growth principles that we talk about?
Yeah, good point. And, you've heard me say it time and time again, but it's really important because one of the things that I've seen in my practice over the years as a coach is the biggest financial black hole that you can manage to find in business seems to be the technology one, right? And we have seen companies that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, some of them millions of dollars, on creating their own technology from scratch. And then the unfortunate byproduct of that is that when they lose their tech guy or they lose their, or some of the core technology becomes antiquated or obsolete, they get stuck with a very expensive problem. So just as kind of a caution flag, whenever you consider anything in technology, make sure that you have this test in mind. And the test that I always ask for my clients is make sure that it's going to make the humans more efficient and more profitable. And if you always look at it from that perspective, then you're usually in pretty good shape with technology, because cool new bells and whistles may get you excited, but it doesn't necessarily solve those two problems, and it can be very expensive. So the other good news is that there's just so much out there today. There's wonderful platforms for franchise business management and all kinds of different tools for just about every element of your business. So, Michael, any technology stories that you want to share before we wrap up today?
The most interesting part is seeing people come to technology that have not used it in their business. And I'm thinking of my wife's a doc, and the only reason that's important is she's now having to do telemedicine.
Yeah.
And it's just not something she ever would have thought of.
Right.
It's forced her to do just what you said, Rick and Rob. How can I use technology to benefit my patients? And it was not something she did. She's now becoming adept at using FaceTime and the other HIPAA compliant platforms that are out there to talk with her patients. And she's seen the value of it now, and I know that it's something that she's going to use in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there was one thing I thought of when you guys were talking, and it comes from an authority and a good friend of mine that really understands technology and the trends moving in the next 10 years. And that is that the rate at which things are changing. When the iPhone was invented, we all were totally in tune. The iPhone, we knew about it. It was clear. It was this new thing. Now I would say in the next 10 years, there are disruptive technologies available to folks that'll creep up on us. And if we're not asking those questions, we're not going to stay competitive, right? Because all of a sudden you have a whole industry that changes based on a technology you barely heard about. It's not like before when of course, everybody heard of an iPhone. Imagine something almost as disruptive happening and you don't even know about it. But that's why the asking yourself, how can I use technology? Why do we do it that way? Is there other things happening that totally change the rules in the game? That's going to happen a lot for folks. And telemedicine is an example, right? Being forced to use it, but maybe now you have to stay with it, right? To stay competitive.
Right.
Yeah, very good. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. And folks out there, our listeners, for those of you participating in the Fight for Your Franchise Challenge, we want to thank you for being a part of this. We believe that small business owners and medium business owners are the backbone of America and the world. And we want to help and support that effort. Just talking to a franchise owner today and said the same thing to him. Thank you for what you guys do every day of the week when you get out there and keep fighting. And that's really what's going to get us through this as a society, as a global society, is everybody working hard to get through this adversity and get through these hard times together. And, I always say, people say we're all in the same boat. I don't know if I believe in that. I think we're in the same storm, but we're all in different boats, and some boats are different. Or I say, the movie stars' boats are a little bit better than our boats, I think. But we're in the same storm, and I can't take credit for that. It's something I saw on social media, but we are working through it. And we look back and see that we've been doing this for about 5 weeks now, and we're hearing more people and more stories and more emails of folks that are reporting that they're working through it. Kind of that initial shock is worn off, and now they're rolling up their sleeves and getting through this time. So congratulations to all of you out there, business owners that are getting through this time. For those of you that are first-time listeners, go to franchisebiblecoach.com and you can sign up for free. Just put your email in, and you'll receive every Monday, you'll receive an email right in your inbox that has links to the podcast and the articles and the resources, as well as our weekly free coaching session. So do take advantage of that, and we'll help you get through this time as well. So I'd like to say thank you to Michael Katz, our guest today, and my co-host Rob. And we will wrap it up for today, but keep in touch, tell your friends, and let's build more and more momentum toward the future here. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Rick and Rob signing off.
Bye.
Have a great day, everybody.